When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. That sentence speaks volumes about the disciples, about their faith in the promise Jesus made, and their commitment and dedication to each other as a body. It would have been easy in the days after Jesus ascended to drift apart, to explore new possibilities, to launch forward alone toward the corners of the globe to spread the gospel. Instead, they waited together in one place. For each of them, the wait probably involved varying mixtures of thrilled anticipation and anxious impatience. More than a few, despite all they had experienced, probably had moments of doubt as days passed by, then a week. Jesus had given them little indication of how long it would take for the Holy Spirit to arrive, offering only the vague, not many days from now. Nor did Jesus offer any clues about what to expect once the Holy Spirit did come. Well, now we know that first there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind inside the house where they were sitting. Had the disciples been outside, that event might have been passed off as a freak of nature. But this sign of the Spirit's presence occurred indoors. Again, where they were made a difference in how they perceived their experience of the Holy Spirit. Then tongues of fire settled on each of them, which must have been disturbing until they realized that this flame did not consume. Almost immediately, they would have thought of the burning bush Moses saw in the wilderness, calling him to go to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, "Let my people go." The wind and the fire were familiar signs of God's presence. But then something extraordinary happened. Each started speaking about God's deeds of power in a different language. A temporary reversal of the ancient curse on the builders of the Tower of Babel, when God confused human language to rein in our hubris. The disciples were not scholars. The benefits of higher education had not been made available to them. Most, perhaps all, of the original disciples were unable to read and write in their own language, much less communicate in anyone else's. But somehow the Spirit gave them the ability to deliver the message of God's saving grace to the cosmopolitan population residing in Jerusalem. We have trouble properly pronouncing the places where all those people came from. And you did great, by the way, Catherine, thank you. I think that might be why the youth who was assigned that lesson didn't show up. I should know, he's my son. But the Spirit empowered those disciples to speak to everyone around them fluently in a language they could understand. At this sound, the crowd gathered, bewildered, amazed and astonished, perplexed. At least one, grasping for some logical explanation, suggested that the disciples were drunk. Maybe he wasn't terribly bright, or maybe he was just desperate for a reason to not believe what he was hearing. But being drunk does not facilitate the use of a foreign language. The rest of the witnesses to this miracle appear to have simply listened. And it was not just the remarkable way that the disciples were delivering the message that convinced many of the truth of their words. It was the content, the story of Jesus' love and sacrifice and forgiveness that opened their hearts and they came to believe. In fact, 3,000 people were baptized. Their lives changed forever for the better. Now we can take this miracle as one among many chronicled in the New Testament, and we can wonder wistfully why such marvelous things no longer seem to occur. But to do so would disrespect the Spirit's abiding presence and power. Too often we resign ourselves to lament the increasing numbers of people, especially among the young in their 20s and 30s, who are not together in one place, but who are rather missing, either ignorant of the gospel or scornful of it, or simply too busy to pay it much heed. And we blame them for their intransigence, or take an odd comfort in demographic studies that show only a small and ever-decreasing percentage of young adults show any affiliation or interest in organized religion. I myself have quipped that if more people only realized that religion is not terribly well organized, we'd all be better off and understand one another. But what do we do about it? Half-hearted measures at best, designed to lure people in by playing on their deepest fears and needs and their pop culture preferences. Jack up worship with music similar to what people download from online. That's a common suggestion. Clear up the clutter of arcane words and phrases that mystify and confuse. Freshen it up. Make it rad, as long as the rad doesn't change what we really like about what we're doing. Serve up alternative activities that will connect with people better. All of those ideas have some merit because each is inspired by a desire to translate the gospel into a language, an experience that others can understand and relate to. But these common bromides miss the point. Each and every proposed solution has the flavor of a technical fix. Swap out this music with that music and everything will be fine. Tweak the liturgy and make it more accessible, spontaneous, organic. Choose your own preferred adjective. Try to be less weird by getting rid of words like sacristy and oblation and ablution and sanctus and gloria. But that's not the formula the disciples followed. That's not what worked for them, doing what was popular. We get so caught up in little things that we think are wrong, that we forget the big thing that is most right, the Holy Spirit. Or we try to embrace and even manipulate the Spirit to achieve our own purposes instead of allowing the Holy Spirit to embrace and control us. So let's start where the disciples were, all together in one place. This need not be a physical reality for us as it was for them, though it doesn't hurt if occasionally we do manage to be together in one place, because we can draw strength from being in God's presence with each other. Christ lives in each of us. Beyond that need to be physically connected as a body, are we all together in one place when it comes to our identity and mission as a church? What does that even mean? How does it feel? Well, it begins with waiting. And none of us are terribly fond of that. We live in a culture defined by immediate gratification. My smartphone has more computing power than the Apollo space capsule. But when it takes 20 seconds to boot up, I can hardly stand it. I've got to make the call now. We want solutions to problems before we really even know what the problems might be. The biggest grossing films are action movies, and we want action now, yesterday if possible. The disciples waited for 10 agonizing days for the promise of the Holy Spirit to be delivered, but they did not wait idly by. They prayed. They worshiped, including at the temple. They didn't throw that part of who they were out. They swapped stories about Jesus and his life and ministry his resurrection and ascension. But most importantly, they were together in one place, ready to receive whatever God would give them, having no clear idea of when the Holy Spirit might arrive or what that might look like. They were open to whatever might come. Such humility and patience, though difficult to practice, are well within our grasp if we ask for those gifts from God and stay aware that we are meant to be in the world, but not of it. Then, when the Spirit comes, we need to try to not freak out. Now, I don't know about you, but if a sound like the rush of a violent wind suddenly came through here, my heart rate would skyrocket. I would question my sanity and possibly exit the room. If divided tongues as if fire appeared, I would probably yell out, "Call 911!" and wouldn't be the only one. And somebody would grab a fire extinguisher. We'd start to evacuate the building. How many times has that happened figuratively, when the Holy Spirit makes an appearance, spawning fear, not faith, because we're not ready? By now, I imagine that many of you want to know what's next. Give me a detailed plan. I need to know exactly how we can translate the gospel for people who haven't heard it, or having heard it, misunderstood it, and rejected it. You have no idea how much I wish it was that simple. I wish I had all the answers. That would make me a very wise and powerful person indeed. But it doesn't work that way with the Holy Spirit. Peter did not go out and research the nationalities resident in Jerusalem at the time and then assign language lessons to individual disciples. That's not how it worked. What happened to them broke out like wildfire, as unstoppable as a mighty wind. What I will say is this: the Holy Spirit has worked powerfully through the people of this parish before in many ways. The Spirit still does and will continue to do so, sometimes subtly, sometimes with undeniable force. And I sense that not long from now, our voice will be heard by young and old, rich and poor, by people of every label and classification we can imagine or create, not because of our cleverness, but because of our obedience to Jesus as Lord. I believe the Holy Spirit will pull us all together in one place, as we have not been for some time. And I hope that we will answer that summons and summon the patience and humility to be ready to perceive how the Spirit chooses to work through us, so that the truest story ever told will reach hearts that are bereft of it. I see a time now coming when people will be bewildered and perplexed by the mystery of God's glory revealed, amazed and astonished to see how God empowers ordinary people to do extraordinary things. I see a dawn emerging that will reveal by its marvelous light such things as we dare not dream.